तकरीर फरमाई है, तकरीबन वही जज्बात उन्होंने मतलब जो कि मुझे कहने थे तकरीबन वही उन्होंने उनका इजहार किया हुआ है। तो मतलब यह है कि अब वो तो शायद उसको फिर दोहराना शायद मुनासिब नहीं होगा, लेकिन सिर्फ ये मैं कहना चाहता हूँ, मैं अभी को दो महीने हुए, 2-2.5 महीने हुए वहाँ से आया हूँ। तो 2.5 महीने से भी मतलब उसके बाद भी कुछ जो वहाँ से इतला आती रहती है कश्मीर से, वो नहायत ही अंदोहनाक है और बहुत ही हम लोग समझिए कि रात भर हम सो नहीं सकते हैं यहाँ पर जो हम लोग हैं, और काफ़ी फिक्र लगी हुई है। और जो मवासलात का ज़रिया है, टेलीफोन वगैरह, चिट्ठियाँ, वो तो कभी मिलती नहीं है, और कई महीनों से जो वहाँ की मतलब जो हम यहाँ पर हैं कोई ख़बर नहीं है कि हमारे लोग कुछ दिल्ली में हैं तो दिल्ली तक टेलीफोन करना पड़ता है, दिल्ली से फिर वो लोग कभी आते हैं वहाँ से, तो उनके ज़रिए थोड़ी खबर मिलती रहती है। लेकिन बहरहाल जो वहाँ के जो गदर हो रहा है, जो जुल्म हो रहा है, उसके बारे में तो हमें इतलात मिलती रहती हैं तकरीबन हर रोज़, क्योंकि हमारे भी अपने आदमी हैं जो कि हमें उसकी खबर देते हैं। तो इस वक्त यह है कि इंशाअल्लाह अभी वो तहरीक जो है इस कदर अब समझिए कि गर्म तहरीक हो गई है कि कश्मीर का जो बच्चा इस वक्त है, सारे जो है 100% 100% लोग जो वहाँ पर हैं बिल्कुल हिंदुस्तान से इस कदर मुतनफिर हो गए हैं, इतनी कि अब मेरे अपने ख्याल में शायद कभी ऐसा वक्त नहीं आएगा कि हिंदुस्तान फिर कभी उनको बज़ौर जब उनको दबा सके और उनको, तो क्योंकि अब ये बिल्कुल बात वाज़ेह हो गई है कश्मीरियों पर कि क्योंकि मतलब जो हिंदुस्तान का नज़रिया है, उनकी जो पॉलिसीज़ हैं, वो सिर्फ ये चाहते हैं कि एक्सपेंशनिस्ट के जितना भी इलाका जहाँ से भी मिल जाए, वहाँ जो बर सगीर में अपने आप को वो समझते हैं कि हम यहाँ के एक समझे कि बहुत दादा किस्म के लोग हैं यहाँ पर, बाकी जो पाकिस्तान है, बांग्लादेश है, श्रीलंका है, और जो भी बाकी सब उनको हम अपने महकूम बना सकें और जो हम कहें वो उस पर अमल करें। तो इस नज़रिए के तहत जो हिंदुस्तान के लीडरान हैं, यहाँ मैं ये कहूँगा कि हिंदुस्तान लोग जो हैं तकरीबन जो आम लोग होते हैं हर एक जगह दुनिया में, सीधे साधे आम लोग जो होते हैं, वो कभी ये नहीं चाहते कि किसी इंसान की आज़ादी पर असर हो सके या उसकी आज़ादी को उसको हम महकूम बनाएं। तो वो सभी तो ये चाहते हैं कि सभी लोग खुश रहें और आज़ाद रहें और जो भी उनका दिल करता है वो करें। लेकिन जो लीडर लोग होते हैं वो अपनी पोजीशन को संभालने के, अपनी कुर्सियों को संभालने के लिए, और जो ये फसाद उठवाते हैं और लोगों में, तो उससे ये होता है कि जो उस इलाके की पॉलिटिक्स है तो उस पर काफ़ी असर पड़ता है। तो यही जो इंडिया के लीडरान जो हैं नेहरू के ज़माने से, जब नेहरू ने वहाँ पर जब बांग्लादेश का सिलसिला हुआ था, तो अमेरिका ने काफ़ी ये हेनरी किसिंजर हैं जो वहाँ के सेक्रेटरी ऑफ स्टेट थे उस वक्त अमेरिका के, तो उनकी किताब में लिखा है कि जब बांग्लादेश का वो चली थी एजिटेशन, वो मुल्क बना था उस वक्त, पाकिस्तान से जुदा हो गया था, तो काफ़ी अमेरिका ने काफ़ी कोशिश की थी कि हिंदुस्तान को कहा था कि भाई देखिए, इंदिरा गांधी को कहा था जो कि उस वक्त बरसदार थी कि भाई आप फौज मत भेजें उधर, आप बाकी फौजी कार्रवाई सब बंद कर दें। तो जो ये है कि बांग्लादेश को जो उस वक्त शायद यहया खान थे प्रेसिडेंट पाकिस्तान के, उनसे हमारी बात हुई है, उन्होंने माना है कि हम बांग्लादेश को आज़ाद करेंगे और कोई फ़ौजी कार्रवाई करने की ज़रूरत नहीं है, इसलिए आप पुरअमन तरीके से उस मुल्क को आज़ाद करें तो क्या हर्ज है उसमें, वो तो आज़ादी तो हो ही गया, इसलिए फ़ौजी कार्रवाई करने की ज़रूरत नहीं। लेकिन उन्होंने ऐसा नहीं किया और फ़ौरन अपनी फ़ौज वहाँ सारी भेज दी वहाँ पर, ये अपने हिंदुस्तान के लोगों को दिखाने के लिए कि जो हम कितने ताकतवर हैं और हम क्या कर सकते हैं, क्योंकि उनको मालूम था कि ये बहुत आसान है, अब तो बांग्लादेश बिल्कुल आज़ाद हो गया, अब तो बस हम फौज भी भेज दें तो कम से कम ये कि सारी जो मतलब उसकी अपनी पोजीशन है इंदिरा गांधी की वो और मजबूत हो जाएगी, वो अपनी वो जो उसकी कुर्सी है उस पर वो खूब जम के बैठ जाएगी। इसी तरह से उससे पहले उसके वालिद नेहरू ने गोवा के मामले में भी ऐसा किया था। गोवा एक छोटी सी जगह है इंडिया में जहाँ पर पुर्तगाल की हुकूमत थी, तो वहाँ पर भी उस वक्त भी ये सब बातें उस किताब में लिखी हैं, ये मैं खुद नहीं कह रहा हूँ, कि नेहरू से कहा गया था, उस वक्त प्रेसिडेंट कैनेडी थे वहाँ पर, उनसे कहा कि देखो भाई वहाँ पर फौजी कार्रवाई करने की ज़रूरत नहीं है, ये छोटा सा इलाका है, पुर्तगाल वाले से हमारी बात हुई है, वो ये छोड़ेंगे खुद ही, थोड़ा सा टाइम दे दो, इसमें 2-3 महीने दे दो हमें टाइम, ये सब जाएंगे। लेकिन उन्होंने उस वक्त भी ऐसा नहीं किया और फ़ौरन जाके उस पर चढ़ाई की और बहुत सारी जानें उस वक्त भी बेगुनाह और बेवजह तरफ हो गई और खामखा की। लेकिन उस वक्त भी नेहरू को अपने मुल्क में अपनी पोजीशन को मजबूत बनाना था, तो उसने कहा कि ये एक मौका है, इसको हम इस्तेमाल करेंगे। बहरहाल कश्मीर में भी इस तरह से उन्होंने हम लोगों को जबरन आज तक 45 साल तक हमको दबाए रखा है, लेकिन अल्लाह का शुक्र है कि अब उसमें काफ़ी फ़र्क आ गया है। मैं ज़्यादा नहीं कह सकता हूँ क्योंकि आपको मालूम है कि यहाँ हम लोग यहाँ हैं और लेकिन हमारे सब लोग जो हमारे कई भी लोग हैं, भाई बहन सब और वहाँ पर हैं, और इसलिए ज़्यादा हम इसमें वो इतना कह सकते हैं कि भाई जो इंसानी हकूक़ हैं जो वहाँ पर उसकी पामाली हो रही है, खुदा के लिए उसको आप बंद करें। और यहाँ के जो मीडिया हैं, यहाँ के जो MPs वगैरह हैं, उनसे भी हमने यही गुजारिश की है, जो हमारी एसोसिएशन है, कि भाई आप इसमें कुछ हमारी मदद करें। तो मैं आप लोगों का बहुत शुक्रगुजार हूँ कि आपने हमें मौका दिया कि कुछ ये अल्फाज आपके सामने बयान करूँ। लेकिन अगर कश्मीर के अंदरूनी हालात के बारे में अगर कोई सवाल हो तो मैं ज़रूर उस पर जवाब देने की कोशिश करूँगा। ख़ास तौर से जो वहाँ की जंग आज़ादी इस वक्त जो लोग हमारे मुजाहिद लोग जो लड़ रहे हैं, तो उसके बारे में तो जो क्योंकि वो सब लोग करीबन जो हमारे श्रीनगर के लोग वहाँ पर हैं काफ़ी उसमें वो सब हमारे जानने वाले हैं और हम उनको बचपन से जानते हैं। छोटे छोटे बच्चे हैं, 16 साल के 15 साल से लेकर 20-22 साल तक उनकी उम्र है, 25 साल तक उनकी उम्र है ज़्यादातर। तो वो इसमें काफ़ी हिस्सा ले रहे हैं और जान की बाजी लगाने के लिए सब तैयार बैठे हैं। I'm sorry, Mr. Max Madden has just left now here, but I really wanted to thank him very much for his sentiments about our beautiful valley. And in fact, most of the things that most of the ideas that he expressed were exactly the ones which I really want to relate. But I'm also grateful to yourself, Mr. Gary and Mr. Max Madden has been sort of in touch with, and I listened to him to the House of Commons, just had a round there and had a chance to look at his bills in the House of Commons, which he has put up there. One of them is the Pakistan bill, isn't it? And that was very encouraging, and I'm sure that with this kind of support from the British House of Commons, who I feel do have that historical responsibility for this state, which is still lying there as a scar on the actual instrument of that independence, which includes Kashmir in Pakistan and the Kashmir part, which is in India, because this state is a complete state consisting of these 4 regions, 2 of them in Pakistan and 2 of them in India. I think the international responsibility for this issue has got to be highlighted with the background of what's happening in what they're trying to do for a place like Lithuania, with only 3 million people in it. And I think Kashmiris deserve better with 10 million people there. And the amount of the number of people that have been killed there so far, and the kind of atrocities which have been committed by the Indian government and the paramilitary forces, in the occupied Kashmir, are really, I don't think there is any other example. I can't really produce any other example. Such a carnage being effected, such a small place in so short a time, just in the last 4 or 5 months, nearly 1,000 people were straight away, which is the official figure, which I'm sure is a lot more than that, were killed, and thousands of people are being tortured in the jails. So I think Kashmir deserves better, and I would request all freedom-loving people, especially the people from this country, the MPs, and to just wake up to this reality and try and express their support for this, just as they're doing all over the world at the moment. The place is under siege. It's worse than a jail. The whole thing is like a jail. In fact, it's worse than a jail, because if you are in a jail, at least people will supply you with some food and something to eat, you see. Whereas in Kashmir, because of this, the way it was done, there's no way you can bring anything to Kashmir, officially that's legally, coming to, except from India, that is over the Bani Hal passes and everywhere and through that tunnel. And that's the only way that anybody can get anything there, see. So, because the natural routes that Kashmir always had, they all lead to Azad Kashmir, going down from Kashmir, down the Uri Baramulla way, across to Muzaffarabad, you see. And so anyway, I'm being told that I think there's other people waiting here to speak to you. I could go on for hours together, but thank you very much.
जुल्म को अमन अदावत को वफा कहते हैं, जुल्म को अमन अदावत को वफा कहते हैं, कितने नादां हैं सर सर को सबा कहते हैं। उठ जा मेरे कश्मीर को कुछ जा तलब, गैर को तेरे मुकद्दर का खुदा कहते हैं। मैं दावत दूंगा जनाब अजमत खान साहब को, जो कि जम्मू कश्मीर लिबरेशन फ्रंट के डिप्टी जनरल सेक्रेटरी हैं, जनाब अजमत खान साहब।
मेरे हमवतन भाइयों, ऑनरेबल मेंबर जनाब सदर महफिल, अस्सलाम वालेकुम। There is quite a bit that's been said about Kashmir, and there is a lot more that you could actually go on saying forever, because this is the story of 42 years of struggle and suppression. I will confine my speech to a number of issues that I think we ought to be raising here today, because we are fortunate enough to have members of parliament here with us. There are three problems, I believe there are three problems we have facing us today. One of the most basic, one of the fundamental problems that we have is that we are not receiving international support for this cause. And I think it is because the Indian propaganda, because the vested interests, and above all, this double standard world we live in, especially the Western world, that keeps ignoring the plight of the poor and weak nations, and they only look at their own interests and their own gains. It is an unfortunate situation, but it is true. And as Max Madden said, we, the people here, can try through democratic means to change that, to change the thinking of this world, to change the thinking of especially this democracy we live in, the United Kingdom. There are few very few members of parliament so far. If you compare the number with the 600, over 600 we have who have spoken, we are thankful to the ones who have spoken in our favor, in favor of our just cause. But the ones who haven't spoken, obviously, it is either that we have failed or they don't understand the struggle. India has proclaimed, India keeps on saying to the world that, look, if we give independence or azadi to Kashmir, this is going to start a chain reaction in India, the rest of the subcontinent, like Ms. Bhutto said. This is a statement coming from the so-called democratic leaders, so-called world's biggest democracy. If you look at the facts, that in fact what they're trying to do is to put down the people's right, because they believe that any people's right, they believe that their own rule, their own self-interests, their own political gains are much more important than the people's rights to which they have signed in the United Nations. They will not adhere, they will not submit to the basic rights of basic human rights. They will not submit to the basic fundamental right, that is the right of self-determination. They go on making excuses like if Kashmir goes, the Indian Muslims will go. They are saying that Indian Muslims, there are more Muslims in India, we know that, than in Pakistan, and they are saying to the world, especially the Muslim world, that if India lets Kashmir go, the Muslims of India will be massacred. This is coming from a country which is well known for its secular image. This is the secular image, this is the secular speeches you get from the Indian leaders, saying that we will hold the Indian Muslims, over 1,100 million Muslims, as hostages so that we can keep Kashmir under our control. This is a democratic country. They claim to be democratic, and yet repression in our state of Jammu and Kashmir, the stories that we hear from the little that we have in Kashmir, the press, that over 1,100 people have been killed so far by the security forces. Only about 200 added up to that figure in 3 weeks ago, when Mirbaz Maulvi Farooq was killed. There are over 3,000 Kashmiri, young Kashmiris, men, women, children, old, who are in prisons in Kashmir. Not only in Kashmir, but in the rest of, they've taken them to rest of the prisons in India. And we understand that they are being tortured to death in those prison cells. Once a person is taken away, we don't know exactly what happens to that person. This is the sort of thing that we are asking the British government, the British members of parliament to look into. The people of Kashmir are fighting for their right. They have given up hope in democracy. They lived with the Indian democracy for 42 years as animals, because that's what they're treated as in Kashmir, animals. And we cannot go on living like that. While British government, rest of the world, rest of the West supports the Lithuanian struggle, they talk about Azerbaijan. You've seen the outcry we heard on television when the Russians massacred the innocent people. We are now looking at our TV screens from Kashmir, and yet our government is quiet about that. Why is this deafening silence? What have the Kashmiri people done against against the British interests. What have the British government got to gain from playing down on the Kashmiri people's genuine cry for freedom and keep going on supporting genocide in Kashmir by the Indian troops? I say that it has been supported because if you look at the statements we're getting from our Prime Minister, the Foreign Secretary, they are hopeless, believe me. Forgive me if I use the wrong words, Mr. Walla, but they are hopeless. This government's so-called neutrality, they say it's a neutrality but not indifference. It is painful, Mr. Walla, because we are subjects of this country, of this government. We have some rights as well. We have a voice that we believe should be heard in this country, and that voice can best be heard through yourselves. And we hope that one day the British government will take action and will look at this situation as they do for Palestine, for South Africa, for Namibia, for Lithuania, and for other people of the world, suppressed people of the world. There is another argument. We are told, Mrs. Thatcher has said that this is a problem between India and Pakistan and we wish them well if they sort it out. For God's sake, they're not going to be able to sort it out unless you help them sort it out. And the only way you can help them sort it out is by saying that, look, people of Kashmir, the 12 million people of the state of Jammu and Kashmir are the only people who can decide what the best solution is. And the best solution at the moment, we are saying, is to give us our right which you promised 42 years ago. And that is the right of self-determination. Whether we want independence or remain with India or with Pakistan is up to the people. The basic issue here is the same one that you supported in the rest of the world. The Kashmir problem is the, if you can call it, the unresolved legacy of the British Raj. The British government has a much more responsibility than any other Western country because we have a very good relationships with India and Pakistan, and both these countries are in the Commonwealth. We can use the Commonwealth platform, if nothing else, to persuade them to look at the people's cry for independence and not to support their own petty interests and to support their interests for gaining some parts of Kashmir, for their hegemonian ambitions, becoming superpowers. Whether India becomes superpower or not is not our problem. We wish them well if they can do that, but not at the cost of the Kashmiri people. We've seen what India did in Bangladesh. We've seen what happened in Sri Lanka. We've seen what they even went to Maldives, and now they're trying in Fiji Islands. They've done it in Nepal. Kashmir is the oldest story of all these stories. The oldest story because we the champions of democracy in the West, the champions of human rights, have never ever raised a finger against the forces of suppression, the so-called forces of repression. It is India's place in Kashmir is not the same one, is not like anything like the British government or British Army's role in the Northern Ireland. This is one thing that we hope that honourable member can make clear to our government, that Indian troops are not playing the same role. There is no hostility between the two communities in Kashmir. Indian forces in Kashmir are forces of occupation, We've seen that, and there is evidence for that, and you will still see that evidence in the years to come, that people are actually fighting because I say they've given up hope in peaceful struggle. They are fighting against the forces of occupation. They're not forces of peacekeeping forces. They're not forces between to safeguard the two communities, as we see the British troops do in Northern Ireland. The Indian forces in Kashmir have the same role as the Argentinian forces played in Falkland Islands. And that is the message that that the Kashmiri people are giving today to the world, that we have suffered enough under those forces for 42 years. Another dimension to this problem is being raised from Islamabad. It is unfortunate that we were very much hoping that our brothers in Pakistan are in our favor for this struggle. But it looks like the thinking in Islamabad is nothing more than gaining Kashmir, just like it is in Delhi.
Yes.
We have statements from Qaid-e-Azam Muhammad Ali Jinnah. I'll read them out to you if anybody wants to see them. 1947, 13th of July 1947. This is an agency report from Reuters. And 17th of June 1947, in which he said, if people of Kashmir want independence, it's their right. Any state in the Indian subcontinent has the right to remain independent. In 1952, Ayub Khan declared this in the United Nations Assembly. In the United Nations press conference, it's on record. All those people in Pakistan, politicians in Pakistan who say that this kaf in Kashmir, this ridiculous argument that they give to divide a nation of 12 million people, is Ayub Khan said in United Nations, and it's on record, that if the people of Kashmir want independence, it's their right. Lately, 1972, and this is Pakistan Times, Zulfikar Ali Bhutto speaking in the National Assembly, saying that if Kashmiris want independence, we will be with them. We asked Benazir Bhutto, who is this man? Where does the policy in Islamabad come from? Why does Robert Gates have more influence on Benazir Bhutto's statements than the people of Pakistan have that influence? Is this the state of democracy in Pakistan? Is this what the people of Pakistan fought for? To have repeated statements that are even, we believe they are even against the Pakistani consensus? We can forgive India. We can forgive India for thinking that Kashmir belongs to India, because the people of India, because the poor, the innocent people of India, believe me, don't even know where Kashmir is. Only the upper class, the politicians who have something to gain from this game are claiming that Kashmir is part of India. And I can give you, this file is full of statements from the Indian people, from people, normal, general, ordinary people of India, who are now saying that enough is enough. Kashmiri people have had enough. Our government of ours has got to take the right steps. Give the people what they want. And yet, what we hear from the Indian government is quite the opposite. And that is because it is not the Kashmir. It is not because letting Kashmir go independent would start a chain reaction in India. It is because VP Singh people like that think it's their chair. It's their leadership that will go. And for God's sake, if you want your leadership, if you want to be champions of human rights, if you want to have a proper name in this world history as the biggest democracy in the world, then give us a chance as well. We are asking for this chance. For 42 years we've been asking for this chance. We've not had this chance at all. And today you are telling the Amnesty International, no, you can't go to India, to Kashmir. You're telling Red Cross, no, you can't go to Kashmir. You're telling members of parliament, you can't go to Kashmir. What kind of democracy is this? What kind of democracy is this that Mrs. Thatcher supports? What can we say, Mr. Waller? How can we express the feeling of the people of Kashmir? If you had some time, you could sit here and watch the video we've got from Kashmir that's recently arrived and listen to the feeling of the people. What has been done to the people of, ordinary people of Kashmir, and what is more likely to be done to them. One more thing that I would like to state is that the government, some members of parliament have also been strongly have been saying that, okay, the United Nations resolutions is the answer. But I think we ought to make that clear, because there has been a conspiracy even at the United Nations. We had the independence option in 1947, and our friends had it taken out. And today they want to rely on those resolutions which don't give us the option for our own aspirations, to express our own national aspirations. I think the people of Kashmir are not even going to accept those resolutions which do not give us that option. They talk about the Simla agreement, which is now superseding. They say it's superseding the UN resolutions. The Simla agreement, maybe it suits Indian government, maybe it suits Pakistani government, but it doesn't suit the Kashmiri people. Therefore, we reject it. And you will hear that cry from all over Kashmir if you have the chance to go there. I'm sorry if I've taken too long time. Mr. Gary Waller has to go. He said 5:15. Now I think if we hear from Mr. Waller now, and then we can continue with the meeting once he is gone. Thank you very much.
बुजुर्गों, दोस्तों, जलसा के इख्तिताम पर हमने कुछ लिटरेचर का बंदोबस्त किया हुआ है, जो कि कश्मीर के बारे में हमारे पास लिटरेचर है। तो अगर आप जाते हुए ये लिटरेचर अपने साथ ले जाएं, इसे पढ़ें, और अगर आप में से कोई दोस्त जो जम्मू कश्मीर लिबरेशन फ्रंट के मेंबर बनना चाहें, तो हमारा एड्रेस इस पे लिखा हुआ है, तो आप हमसे रब्ता कायम कर सकते हैं। We are thankful to our honourable member of Parliament from Keithley, Gary Waller, who unfortunately has got to go to another meeting, and now I'll invite him to express his point of view on the Kashmir issue.
Assalamu alaikum. It's very great honor for me to follow so many eloquent speakers and to express my agreement with so many of the things that I've heard this afternoon. Of course, Max Madden and I disagree about many things in British politics, and in a democratic country it's right that we should speak about them forcefully, as we do in the House of Commons. But about one issue there is no disagreement, and that is about what needs to be done to give the people of Kashmir the right to determine their own future. We have followed the events which have unfolded in Jammu and Kashmir in recent months with grave foreboding. We have seen the way in which the Indian government has prevented observers from Amnesty, from the media, from political parties going to Jammu and Kashmir to see for themselves the outrages which have continued to take place, the murders of innocent men, women and children, the rapes which have been perpetrated by members of the Indian military, the injuries which have caused such anguish to so many thousands of people throughout the country. Of course, one wants to see restraint exercised so that India and Pakistan do not drift towards war. But that is the short-term objective. In the long term, one can see that there is no way this situation can be resolved unless the people themselves have the opportunity to say what their view is. Because even if it is possible to prevent war from coming in the short term, one knows that there is unfinished business and that the way in which the country was divided over 40 years ago is no way that the situation can be resolved in the long-term future. What I think is very remarkable and admirable is the restraint which has been shown by members of the Kashmiri community in this country. I think that those who imagine and spread the idea that militancy exists among the community here should come and see the way in which views have been expressed calmly here today. And they should come to Bradford and see the way in which members of the Pakistani community, of the Kashmiri community, have expressed their views reasonably and yet forcefully. It's right, of course, that people here should express their solidarity with the people of Kashmir, because however long they remain in this country, of course they will retain a loyalty to the country of their homeland. Loyalty to one's country, patriotism, is not something of which one should be ashamed. Most of the great conflicts in the world today can be attributed to the fact that superior forces have tried to suppress loyalty to country. One sees that situation in Eastern Europe. One sees it in a number of different countries to which Max Madden referred. But it is something that at the end of the day one cannot really suppress, because loyalty to a country like Kashmir, and I say, look, Kashmir is a country, loyalty of that kind is something which will outlast petty subjugations in the short term. The fact is that there are well over 10 million people in Jammu and Kashmir, that they have many natural resources, they have very considerable skills and the ability to determine their own future. And that is something that India, of course, wishes to deny them. It is something in which the rest of the world has got to speak up very loudly, because I'm quite in agreement with the view that world opinion has a very important part to play in this matter. The fact is that India is dependent for so many things on the rest of the world. India wishes to be a major force in international affairs. But the rest of the world has to make it clear to India that unless it is prepared to allow the people of Kashmir to express their own view, to determine their own futures, then India cannot enjoy the respect which it wants to see in order to enjoy that kind of influence throughout the world. That is a message which must go forth to India, and I hope that the people who come from Kashmir and are now living in this country will make very clear. It is certainly one which members of Parliament who have signed the many early day motions in the House of Commons have made clear time and time again. And I, like Max Madden, want to have an opportunity of going to Jammu and Kashmir to see the situation for ourselves, to hear what the people who have suffered so much from the killings, from the violence which has been meted out to them, to hear eyewitness accounts from them, so that we can come back to Britain and tell the people of the House of Commons, can tell the people of Britain, and can tell the rest of the world, so that nobody is in any doubt about the situation today in Kashmir. India claimed, of course, that there was an election and that the people of Kashmir made their views known. We mustn't let them get away with that, because, of course, we know full well that only 3% of the people voted in that election. It is really laughable that the Indian government should maintain that position when the overwhelming majority of the people of Jammu and Kashmir made clear their view by abstaining from that election. What is needed is not an election, but a plebiscite so that the people can express their view. The fact that India is now beginning to allow media to go into Jammu and Kashmir does, I think, demonstrate that they are susceptible to what people say. The fact is that they were criticized so heavily for denying access that they have very, very slowly had to allow a little bit of access. That demonstrates, I think, that with more pressure, and that is something that we must have, that the Indian government will eventually have to give way and allow the people to have their say. I very much hope that before the end of this summer, it will be indeed possible for a parliamentary delegation to go out. I, like Max Madden, am in touch with the Indian High Commission. Only this week, in fact, we were discussing this matter with the Pakistan High Commissioner, with Shahrazad Khan, and also with representatives of the British government, who I think would welcome a delegation to go out there and to report back on some of the things that they have seen in Jammu and Kashmir. Britain does have influence, of course, and I, like Max Madden, call upon the Foreign Secretary and ministers in the Foreign Office not just to say that we are not insensitive to what is happening in Kashmir, but to actually use this country's influence to move India and Pakistan towards a negotiating table in which I'm sure other great powers have a part to play, to come to an agreement, to provide the prerequisites for a plebiscite to take place. Because I'm quite clear in my mind that until that plebiscite does take place and the people of Kashmir have an opportunity to express their wish for self-determination and for independence if they so desire, we shall see time and time again repetitions of the unacceptable outrages which have marred the last few months. The people of Kashmir are crying out for justice. It would be indefensible of us not to respond to their cry. We speak here in a responsible way, we speak moderately, we speak with restraint, but let no one imagine that because of that restraint we do not feel angry about what has been going on in Jammu and Kashmir. We must speak ever more loudly, we must convince more and more of the opinion leaders in Parliament and outside Parliament in this country to recognize the situation that exists, to say very, very clearly that it cannot be allowed to continue, and that the day when peace comes to Kashmir will be the day that the people of Kashmir are allowed to express their own view through a plebiscite, to have self-determination and independence if that is their wish. I entirely agree with what we have heard today. It cannot be a plebiscite which allows people just the opportunity of acceding to India or to Pakistan. It must be a plebiscite in which there is a third option, and that option is the option of independence. I hope that that day will come sooner rather than later, because that is the day that Kashmir can enjoy true peace and freedom.